Ever since the late 70s, the sport of golf has surprisingly been very prominent in video games, likely due to the slow gameplay for ease of coding. So, by the early 90s, there had been lots of lessons learned on how to make a golf game, and Japanese developer TonyOTwitch took that knowledge and developed true golf classics Pebble Beach Golf Links for the Super Nintendo. But before we get into that, a quick shout out to this video's sponsor, Techeries. They're your one-stop place for all things tech and gaming news. Plus, they host live shows every Sunday on YouTube and Twitch. Follow the link on screen and in the description to check out their page. And be sure to drop a follow so you don't miss out. Released in April of 1992 in both Japan and North America, then later that year in Europe, this is actually the second Super Nintendo entry into TonyOTwitch's long-running True Golf series, with the previous one taking place on the YLI Country Club golf course. With that game having a reasonable amount of success, it was the developer's prerogative to next digitize the prestigious Pebble Beach Golf Course. A popular and challenging course in the golfing world, the name alone was enough to pique the interest of fans of the sport. So how was the experience for these folks? And was it enough to satisfy both gamers and golfers sufficiently? After two simple developer and course credit screens, the title photo of Pebble Beach's signature 7th hole slowly fades in to the sound of crashing waves. But before the image can fully brighten up, and there hasn't been any button inputs yet, we're treated to an overview of some of the course's holes, with an additional highlight replay of a shot on that hole, likely from the devs testing the game. Once a pair of holes go by, we return to the fading in photo that completes the sunrise, and we get our full title. Upon pressing a button, we head to the main menu where you can begin a quick game, continue a save, or start a fresh game where you can personalize some options. It's here that you can also manage game data, like your personal profile, stats for stored players, or overall course records. When starting a new game, you can pick your mode that match those of actual golf rule sets, and play with up to 4 players. There's the most common, stroke play, where every hit of the ball is counted on your scorecard, with the goal of getting a lower number than that of the course's intended average. There's tournament play that has the same rules as stroke play, but you're competing against the scores of pro characters in the game data, like a real tournament. Skins play is a 2 to 4 player game where you set the value of each hole to your liking, and whoever wins the hole wins the points, or money if you're so bold. And in the case of a tie, the value carries over and gets added to the next hole, thus upping the stakes and tension. Meanwhile, match play is a 2-player only mode that's basically the same as skins, but the value is locked at 1, and ties don't carry value over, the goal being to win more holes than your opponent. And finally, there's practice play, where you can head to any hole you want to practice and learn the course's intricacies. Once modes are set and profiles are picked, you get to choose a caddy per player. There's Casey, who has the quintessential early 90s mullet and mustache, DQ, who kinda looks like he had a bit too much Dairy Queen, Michael, who hasn't come out of the prep school closet just yet, and Danny Trejo, Dog, the token California Latino. They'll be helping you throughout the game with advice, green speeds, and occasional trivia about Pebble Beach's history if there isn't anything important to give advice about. There's no difference between them, aside from dialogue on non-important details, but important advice will usually all be worded the same. Afterwards, you're ready to hit the links. Much like the real game of golf, you need to take time on every shot to take in information about the wind, how the ball is lying, and possible hill bounces that can occur after you shoot. The data portion of the screen will show a bird's eye view of the hole you're on, along with an aiming line to show where you're looking at. Above the map, there's a wind compass that will indicate the wind's direction and speed as related to the map, and beside that is a picture of your ball showing the lie. While on the tee and on the fairway, these are the best unimpeded lies you can have. Whereas, if you've landed in the rough cut of the grass, or even worse, the bunker, it will indicate that here, but also show you up to 3 different levels of how deep the ball has sunk in. The deeper you are, the harder it is to get out. Over in the left window is the playfield. The course is rendered in that rough Super Nintendo 3D and using flat pixel art for more detailed items like trees, houses, and bushes. It actually was a very comprehensive rendering of the golf course, and the closest thing to feeling like you were actually there. You're able to rotate the direction you're aiming by pressing left or right on the D-pad, while keeping an eye on the compass at the bottom. As soon as you stopped rotating, the environment would re-render to match where you're looking at. You also had the option to raise the camera up higher using the up and down D-pad buttons. And, once again, the environment would re-render to show you what you were up against. As impressive as this was, there was always a delay while the game processed the 3D graphics, which would become pretty annoying. Sure, you were able to hold the button to move multiple instances before the re-render would start, but when you were getting into small movements and adjustments, it was getting tiring to tap, then wait, tap, then wait. However, this wasn't enough to make you put the game down, and more often than not, the game itself was actually setting you up as best as possible to begin with, so it wasn't a gripe that often came up. While you're lining up your shot, you have a series of parameters to select and set before the swing can be taken, most of which are shown in the shot setup window, usually located at the top left of the environment screen. The first window has the aforementioned camera height slider, along with a compass showing the wind direction as related to where you're currently facing, as well as how far away from the pin you've aimed. Moving forward, the next screen is club selection. By pressing left and right on the D-pad, you can select which club you want to use, and it shows the maximum distance the ball can be hit if all power and contact parameters are optimal. You of course need to take this kind of information into account, especially if you have a shot that only affords you a tight landing space. Once you select your club, the next window shows your foot placement. Much like the real game, how you have your feet positioned versus where the club will swing can affect the spin of your ball mid-flight, thus causing its trajectory to curve. Here, you can choose if you want to line up straight ahead, or if you want to curve to the left or to the right in varying degrees. This will become important on holes that aren't just straight and will curve around forests and hazards. Moving along, we finally arrive at the last window, the shot window. The two parameters being power and contact are ones that require timing to hit optimal shots. Pressing B will start the power gauge filling up, and once it reaches the maximum power, it immediately resets to the minimum power and continues to loop until you hit the B button again. This mechanic caused me to accidentally duff some shots because I wasn't fast enough to stop the gauge at max. But in a funny way, that actually mirrors some of the worst shots I've ever taken in my life. On most shots, you'll be trying to get maximum power, but the closer to the green you get, the more you're going to want to cross-reference your club's power to a smaller power output, or else you're going to completely overshoot the green. Once power is set, a red dot will slide its way across the ball gauge in a zigzag pattern, heading down, then back up. This indicates where the club will come in contact with the ball and can have some major consequences if you don't hit it where you intend. Not only that, but you get only one loop of the zigzag before it automatically takes a swing, which will be you missing the ball entirely. Basically, you gotta focus in on this one, or else all that setup from before was for naught. In most favorable conditions, you're likely aiming to hit the ball in the middle, but other spots can be to your benefit depending on your situation. Hitting it higher on the ball will give it a lower flight arc and topspin, which is great for getting good distance if you have to shoot into the wind, or if you want to avoid hitting a tree branch. You'll want to contact the ball lower if you're sitting in deep rough or sand, or if you're looking to get a higher arc to allow the wind to affect your ball more. After all that is established, your golfer pops on, takes the swing, and you watch the ball flight unfold, both on the environment screen and the overhead map. When the ball is about to land and bounce, the environment screen re-renders and follows the ball so you can see the outcome until it comes to a complete stop. Then, you gotta do it all over again. Now, when you finally get the ball onto the green, there's a slight change in what you have to go through to make a stroke. Before anything else, your caddy will give you some advice and show you a grid on the green. This will show you whether the green is tilted left or right, which will affect the curve of your putt. They also show you on a different window if the slope is going downhill away from you or uphill. You still have to aim your shot like before, and while you do still go through club selection, the groundskeepers would rather that you just use your putter anyways. Moving forward, you skip the stance parameter and go straight to the power meter. The contact gauge is there too, but you won't be using that for putting. Here, it's especially important to pay close attention to the power, since if you hit it too strong, you'll rocket past the cup, or if you hit it too weak, you won't even make it to the cup at all. And when you finally sink the ball, you get shown your score for the hole, and then off you go to do it 17 more times. With only one course in the game, it may seem like it would get repetitive real fast. However, when a lot of random factors are tossed in, like the wind direction, wind speed, your club selection, your stance selection, and how well you can control the power and contact, no two playthroughs are alike. And much like the real sport, you have to keep practicing over and over to obtain an optimized consistency to be able to score well. This is actually really advanced gameplay for a Super Nintendo era game. For 1992, this game had very comprehensive parameters and information that made it feel like the real thing. It probably helped that there was only one course after all. But unfortunately, I found that the power meter was quite misleading when I was putting. It was that, or the grid was not accurate. Either way, something was giving me inaccurate information that was causing me to short my putts often. The data provided just didn't make sense. And of course, I'd be more than willing to admit I just need to get good if it was me actually swinging the putter, but that's just not what's happening here. Regardless though, once you figure out the game's putting mechanics, it's a great golfing sim for its time. And while I'm playing it now in the winter, it's making me want spring to hurry up already so I can go hit the tee box. The gameplay of Pebble Beach Golf Links gets an 8 out of 10. The logo screen for T&E Soft, along with the logo for the Pebble Beach Golf Course, are left simple and get the basic point across. And then we get treated to an actual photo of the actual signature hole of the real deal. Now, you would think that the image would be a pixelated mess, and while it was compressed down to get onto a 16-bit cartridge, this image seemed to use smart blurring. But it also helped that the image was just not too complex. There were just shades of green, ocean blue, sky blue, some bunkers, and of course the pin in the middle. And while I'm giving praise to this single image, note that this also applies to the other handful of photo images that this game has to offer. But back to the title screen, we have to give our heads a bit of a shake at whoever thought a yellow, thin font title would look at all good on top of a white and super light blue background. And that copyright info at the bottom did not have to be that large. Just shrink it down and pop it over to the right a bit. Use the image's natural dark areas. But anyway, art critic Tony aside, we go through the simple Windows 95 style menu to get rolling into the action. It's all simple and clear, and all you really need for this kind of game. Windows and fonts in the actual gameplay are also very clear and readable, which is good because you'll be needing to parse a lot of data to play this game effectively. The putting grid was great for reading the break left or right, but for some reason the slope reader when getting advice from the caddy just didn't seem to match what ended up actually happening, so that got annoying. And that advice window, by the way, I'm fairly certain they didn't need to layer information on top of each other like that. As soon as the caddy starts saying more than 3 lines of dialogue, the text covers up the slope image. And Lord help you if the sentence is so long that it covers up the distance info further down in the window too. Looking at the environment window, the course is rendered out quite simple but nicely. Important details like the fairway, the rough, bunkers, and the green were all rendered out in super simple 3D. But there were also great use of flat images of trees, bushes, and houses to make things at least look a bit more fleshed out. I'm pretty certain the actual Pebble Beach had a lot more density of these things, but here on the Super Nintendo, we'll take what we can get. The golfer himself is also a digitized series of video frames strung together to make the golf swing animation. He was also able to have his shirt color changed to correspond with which player he was representing during multiplayer. Think Mortal Kombat's visual style, but with less blood and more cans of beer. A funny little detail that feels like it's unique to this 16-bit entry is that the Super Nintendo's pixelated 3D graphics would sometimes play with your head when you're attempting to sink the ball while putting. The image gets more pixelated the further away from you, so when looking at the cup, it's just a big pixelated mess. And it gets even worse if the ball is rolling towards it and then the game chokes up because it's re-rendering the next scene. It takes just as long if the ball had stopped short, so you're left holding your breath for a few seconds wondering if you sunk it or putted it with the strength of a 5-year-old. Gosh, what excitement for a golf game. The graphics of Pebble Beach Golf Links gets a 7 out of 10. A lot of sports games of the early 90s didn't come with a robust soundtrack, especially a golf game where the players tend to keep the silence and focus. That being said, and this might just be the nostalgia talking, the small offerings this game had for music are actually really good. They're not action-packed bangers by any means, but they fit the vibe perfectly, while also kind of forcing you to bop your head a little bit. The opening theme has an uplifting start to it as it goes into some bass guitar forward modern jazz. Hitting up the pregame menu, you'll be treated to an upbeat track with some deep drums cutting through, but not being distracting. And finally, on the course, we get a whimsical jazz flute tune backed by classic jazz bass. Seriously, you're going to feel like you're in some crusty upper-class party in the country club. But man, does it just slap. Of course, if you so wish, you have the option to turn the music off while in gameplay, and I can also see why people would do that. Very often I found myself humming along to the song and had to stop to concentrate. I didn't even care that it was just the same song over and over. Not once did I feel like the song got repetitive, and honestly, the music is probably one of the least likely things you'd expect to be so top-notch in this game. As for the sound effects, there's not much on offer here, but once again, when they do show up, they're used to great effect. The sound of a well-struck ball, or the bounce when it hits the fairway, and especially when the ball sinks into the plastic hole. Just great sounds. And on the flip side, once you hear the muffled sound of your ball getting stuck in the rough or the bunker, just makes you want to snap your club. On holes close to the ocean, much like the actual Pebble Beach, you'll hear the constant crashing of the waves nearby and just feel quite serene. The music and sound get a 9 out of 10. As good as this game is, it's the nostalgia that earned it its spot in this review list. I was about 8 years old when this game came out, and of course, the kind of games that I was more interested in were puzzlers, action, or adventure games. This was also a time where my dad was taking me out to the driving range to teach me his favorite kind of game, golf. Now, of course, as a youngling, I didn't much care for the sport at all. Golf isn't the kind of game for a hyperactive child, but I wasn't that much of a brat to throw a fit and say, I don't want to go. Plus, even as a kid, I could see he was excited to just spend some time and impart what knowledge he could with me. One day, his attention would be drawn to the name Pebble Beach on a Super Nintendo game box. And knowing that I was an avid gamer, I think he saw it as an opportunity to dip his toes into my hobby while still being entertained by his hobby. And man, did we ever play the bejesus out of this game. It didn't matter that we were on the same course over and over, because that just made for good practice. Just firing up the music brought me back to when we'd be hanging out in the basement swapping turns. And even when we would take our yearly trip to a timeshare in a mountainous golf town. We'd head out early to play the sport, come back home, take a bit of a nap, then fire up this game for a few hours before Pops had to go barbecue for dinner. Of course, I share a lot of memories with my dad in many things, but this one is especially special to me since video games truly were a big part of my life, and to have my non-gamer dad sit and game with me for a bit is something I'll always cherish. Heck, one can argue that this game is what helped me connect what parts of golf I do enjoy, because now I do love to hit the links when I can. Or maybe I'm just getting old, I don't know. The nostalgia hit of Pebble Beach Golf Links gets a 10 out of 10. When one thinks of video games, a golf sim isn't exactly synonymous with the medium's core audience. And yet, considering that this game was a sequel, and more games came afterwards, it would certainly be considered a success. TonyOTwitch even ported it to the Sega Genesis and PC-98 a year later in 1993. For typical gamers who enjoy strategy and numbers, they could get some entertainment out of this title. It's chock full of replayability and tactical options. Meanwhile, fans of the sport will find this to be a comprehensive experience on one of golf's most popular courses. Now, granted, newer golf games have come out that also feature the course in much higher fidelity. But True Golf Classic's Pebble Beach Golf Links also serves like a great time capsule of the technology of the time, and just how smart of a development it was.